Parasocial relationships. I feel like everybody's talking about these recently, but I have not seen anybody really talk about it from an autism perspective, and I think we should tie that into the conversation because the group of people who struggle the most with understanding boundaries and relationships and making friends are probably the most likely to develop unhealthy parasocial relationships and get hurt by them. Also, I know that I said on my Instagram story a while ago I was going to make a video on the ableism of AI this week, but my computer decided to drink a full liter of water and then I had to get a new laptop, so I lost about 2 days of research and I have to read a whole textbook for that video, so we're doing things a little out of order. And I know the irony of my computer dying while I was trying to write a video about AI is not lost on me, but I'm currently operating on a 2 weeks on, 1 week off video schedule, so you're gonna get that video not next week, but the week after. Yeah. Also, for friends who need it, I'm a white person with light brown, shoulder-length curly hair, and I am wearing a t-shirt that makes me look like a camp counselor. It's like tie-dye with blue and orange and purple and a bright orange collar, and I'm sitting in front of a wall with some leaves on it. I'm hoping this is gonna fix my camera focusing problems from last week. We'll see how it goes. Anywho, so I'm not going to do the thing that every commentary YouTuber has done lately and say parasocial relationships are bad and we should try to not have them at all, because that is unhelpful, unrealistic, impractical, and y'all know my favorite way to look at things. It's lacking so much nuance, correct? And also, it has a very little understanding of disability theory and minority experiences within the social realm, which is important. So let's start with defining our terms here. Now, the definition that I've created for this is kind of a bastardized combination of like 3 different sources, so I'm not going to quote it, but basically parasocial relationships are one-sided relationships where someone puts a lot of time, commitment, and emotional energy into caring about either a public figure who doesn't know that they exist or a fictional character. Most conversations on the internet about parasocial relationships usually talk exclusively about people caring about influencers and musicians, but the actual definition very much expands far beyond that. Like, the fact that your dad really likes the football player Tom Brady, that's also a parasocial relationship. Even people that you don't explicitly follow or care about but see on the cover of People magazine when you check out of the grocery store are often stored in our brains as parasocial relationships. We feel like we, on some level, know these people because we have seen their faces a lot and we know some things about them. Parasocial relationships often involve a feeling of artificial intimacy and the illusion of closeness, perceiving something a person with a following of millions of people puts out as actually specifically for and about you. The rise of social media has created more of this, like the fact that I took you all on my journey from my laptop dying dramatically to getting a new one to how long the file transfer said it was going to take because 17 million hours was way too funny not to share. And to my 11,000 followers on Instagram, that felt like I was giving you personal, intimate knowledge of my life and that I am close with you and I can share my computer saga with you, when in reality, I can't even process the existence of 11,000 people. That number's not real. I recognize the usernames of maybe 7 people who comment on everything. I've met a handful of people who follow me in real life, but like, I am not close to you at all. I know in theory that you exist, and I'm grateful that you exist because you're the reason I can do what I do, but I do not know that you, yes, specifically you, exist. But to you, it feels personal and targeted at you, and it's very trippy to think about from both sides. This term has become a major buzzword of late, but it was initially created in 1956 by Donald Horton and R. Richard Wall to describe a seeming face-to-face relationship between spectator and performer, basically in reference to how when people started having televisions in their homes for the first time, people started to feel emotional attachments to the people they would see on screen. There are a lot of theories as to why parasocial relationships happen, many of which are rooted in either fully or partially debunked science, with a lot of it in reference to attachment styles, saying that people are more or less likely to form parasocial relationships based on their attachment style. I intend to make a video about attachment styles at some point, but the short version is that attachment styles do exist, they are a thing, but their use in clinical research after they were discovered as a thing basically hinges on the idea that everybody has one primary attachment style of the 4, not that relationships are fluid and different and there are so many factors that connect themselves to how people attach to other people. So basically it's a case of clinically, it's a phenomenon in the specific laboratory environment in which it was studied, but we really cannot extrapolate that to the wider scope of understanding all of humanity because human existence does not have control groups or any of the other things that exist within a lab study that make lab studies often wholly unrealistic. There is some other research suggesting that people who are lonelier and or have higher levels of social anxiety are more likely to form more intense parasocial relationships, but several different studies have several different answers as to whether that's statistically significant or not. There's questions about how you can quantitatively measure the intensity of a relationship or what counts as loneliness, etc., etc. I personally feel like this being a phenomenon would make a lot of sense, given that people with high levels of social anxiety fit into the neurodivergent category, and a very large portion of experiences under the neurodivergent umbrella include a propensity for hyperfixation, and the people who are lonelier are more likely to spend more time focusing on parasocial relationships than on real ones, because it's relationships. If they can't find them in real life, they will create them online or via reading lots of books. I know that I grew up reading tons of books and my friends are all book characters because I didn't have a lot of friends in real life. I tried to do research specifically on autism and parasocial relationships because that's where my discussions with others on the topic usually begin, but all I found was one study that I'm not even going to bother to link below about autistics and parasocial relationships with imaginary characters, with the conclusion of the study being like, wow, seems like autistic people maybe actually have imagination sometimes. So wild, we had no idea. And that was all I found, so that was not helpful, but it made me very grateful that I put up a question box on my Instagram stories because y'all had some really smart things to say that will just supplant this lack of research. Basically, the majority of the messages that I got basically said, as an autistic person, I like parasocial relationships because they are safer and they teach me things, which makes sense. For a population that is often hypersensitive to rejection and experiences more rejection, a relationship where you literally cannot be rejected is an ideal one. It's also one where you can enjoy social interaction without having to worry about masking or saying the right things. You also don't have to schedule things or get panicky about last minute canceling because you don't feel great. Like for me, I watch a lot of YouTubers. That's an inherently parasocial dynamic, and I usually watch them while I'm getting dressed in the morning, while I'm cleaning my room at night, while I'm doing the dishes, or I need a brain break in the middle of researching something difficult, or background noise while editing videos and writing job applications, etc. Those are all times when I'm only halfway paying attention to what's going on, and I'm often in my pajamas or changing clothes or eating food, which are times when I don't really want to hang out with real friends because my ability to be a decent friend during that time would be absolutely terrible. But I get that feeling of a friend telling me something interesting, so I feel less alone during those times anyway, and it keeps me occupied. It's not that I'm inherently a lonely person. I do have a lot of friends, but we all operate on woefully different schedules, and I spend most of my time alone in this apartment doing work. So this is a great in-between for me. I get full control over all aspects of my social interaction. I don't have to worry about myself or how I'm coming across, and it gives the person on the screen the full freedom to create whatever they want and interact with me however they want to, because they don't know that I exist. We'll also talk about this more down the line, but watching a lot of YouTube and TV and movies has taught me a lot about different kinds of body language and facial expressions and the way that humans interact with each other. Reading books has taught me a lot about how friendships and relationships work without having to deal with the anxiety of being in that social interaction. It's how I can look at human nature like a scientist looks at a cool bug, and it's taught me how to be a person. It's very important. And also, in fact, there is some pretty solid research that parasocial relationships, particularly with book characters, not necessarily saying that book characters are better than other kinds of parasocial relationships, but that's where most of the research is, if that makes sense, have many positive effects on people, showing that they significantly help people with low self-esteem, they help people find communities and belonging in minority groups they wouldn't have otherwise had access to, they increase people's theory of mind or their understanding of what another person might be feeling, and they help reduce prejudices toward people who are different from us. Which is why proper and authentic representation in media, whether scripted or not, is super important, but we're not going to go down that rabbit hole today. That's half my channel. Particularly for minority groups, these parasocial relationships are a great way for people outside of our minority group to learn more about us and see us as human beings without requiring extensive labor from minority people to teach them. Obviously, being an educator is hard. This is a very difficult job, but having 100 people watch one of my videos and learn a lot about disability is easier than having 100 disabled people in the world have to individually educate those people one-on-one, right? Like, this is objectively more expedient. And research has shown that we encode social and emotional support from our real friends and perceived social and emotional support from our parasocial friends to be the same.
Gardner and Knowles found that just exposing someone to a picture of a favorite television character can increase their performance on certain cognitive tasks. They call this a social facilitation effect.
Humans seem to genuinely perceive parasocial relationships as part of our actual social circle of relationships. So yes, the fact that you feel real grief about the death of your favorite character on a TV show is not silly or stupid. It's a genuine phenomenon, and it's perfectly normal, and it can actually be quite healthy, as long as it's not taking over your life entirely or ruining long periods of time in your life. We're gonna get into the dangers in a second, but it's not inherently a problem. These relationships help people grow all the time and can help people gain the confidence to go out into the real world and make real friends based on what they learn from their imaginary ones. However, on the flip side, if parasocial relationships involve social media, too much time focused on them has been shown to cause higher levels of anxiety, loneliness, and social isolation. They can also create social media addiction and unrealistic expectations for other real-life people because we're so used to only seeing the highlight reels of a real person's life or the scripted perfection of a book or TV character. I had somebody ask me what the difference between a hyperfixation on a celebrity and a parasocial relationship with one is, because sometimes it does look parasocial, but it actually isn't. And I feel like the primary difference is like, is that person memorizing facts about a celebrity with no emotional connection to their existence and well-being, or do they feel very emotionally attached, if that makes any sense? But again, that line is very blurry. But let's talk about the downsides of parasocial relationships. First, there's the knowledge that your favorite creators are inherently trying to sell you something. Sometimes literally when it comes to merch and sponsorships, but also our content. I want you to like me and find me interesting and entertaining so that you are going to watch what I do on here. I would say so I can make an income, but honestly my primary goal of being on here is to make sure that people don't end up in some of the terrible situations I've ended up in throughout my life, so it's kind of a little bit selfish. But either way, the person that you see on here is going to be different from my normal, regular, every single day self on some level, because I am trying to put forward some element of professionality and put togetherness so that people will consume my content. Some creators put on full characters, others are just themselves. I'm definitely more in the latter myself, but there's always going to be some level of manufacturedness in what I put up on here in comparison to who I am as a real human, because this is only a very small sliver of my everyday life. I see this as work. This is my job, and I have not working Sydney, and those are different things. So what you're seeing via media with me or any other creator isn't inherently real. It is intended to market something or someone to you in one way or another, which is why media literacy and thinking critically are so important. The other main problem is the issue with it becoming an addiction or an obsession, in that it hurts your ability to be the human you want to be. Some people in intense parasocial relationships start to emulate every aspect of that person to the point where they don't form their own individual identity to try to make friends in the real world. There's also stan culture, which often devolves into aggressive arguments about something a celebrity did, defending terrible and dangerous behavior because they feel like they know this celebrity person and they just wouldn't do that, or it's not that bad, and doing things that legitimately endanger the celebrity, such as doxing or stalking them, or going to dox and stalk other people in the name of defending their celebrity of choice, or getting so invested that if something happens to them or they do something terrible, it feels like the world is absolutely crashing down around you. Again, some level of grief is normal and natural, but if it becomes all-consuming for a very long period of time to the point where it's hindering one's ability to function, that is an issue. Now, speaking of celebrities doing terrible and dangerous behavior, let's talk about the dangers of when parasocial relationships become a lot blurrier. Like, when it's still parasocial, but there's interaction between the celebrity and the fan. I feel like a lot of recent discourse on parasocial relationships just kind of uses that term across the board to somehow cover both like a devoted Swiftie and then like one of the children in Colleen Ballinger's group chats, and those two are fundamentally different situations and dynamics. And only one thing in my research, I can't remember if it was an article or a video, actually distinguished between the two, calling it a symbiotic relationship, one where the relationship becomes mutually beneficial. But that also does not feel totally correct to me because it's still one-sided even if there's interaction between the two. So I did some research into other Greek prefixes, because I'm a nerd, to try to find one that conveyed the idea of para, meaning beside or resembling, and inter, meaning mutual and even. I ended up settling on pseudo or quasi, meaning like false or resembling. So rather than symbiotic, we're going with quasi-parasocial for this kind of interaction. This would cover situations like somebody who frequently meets a celebrity at a meet and greet, so the celebrity always remembers your name, or who occasionally DMs with that celebrity. It's still parasocial in that the fan is always going to be doing more of the heavy lifting in the situation and are going to be way more emotionally invested in it than a regular relationship, but the creator does know that they exist and has maybe had a conversation or two with them, maybe more in the case of some of the rooming situations we've seen on this platform that come from an abusive of this power dynamic. In researching for this video, I watched a really great video podcast episode thing that explained a lot of these concepts really neatly. I've linked it at the top of my sources so you can check it out, but this specific quote really stood out to me.
Now, I don't mean to suggest that creators don't care about you and they're all fake if they DM you back. That's not what I mean. I just mean there's really no way to undo the fact that it's always going to be this type of dynamic between a fan and a creator. And if you think anything else when it's this type of situation that I'm referring to, like, I think it's mistaken it's misguided to interpret it any other way. Now, I'm also not saying that it's impossible for like fans to, I don't know, become employees or become actual in IRL friends. Sometimes you have common ground, but that's that's unusual. I feel like that's the exception. That's not the standard that people who look up to their idols or creators should live by.
No matter what, the creator is seen as a figure of authority, and the basis of the relationship is that one person loves, trusts, and looks up to the other without actually knowing them or seeing them as a full human being, which is a major power dynamic that can be used and abused intentionally or not. And it's on the person in that position of power to figure out how that imbalance works and where to draw boundary lines to make sure that the fan is not put in a weird or an uncomfortable situation. Like, creators should definitely talk to their fans and interact with their fans. It's kind of part of the job on some level, and we are so grateful to all of you for being the reason that we are able to do what we do, but it is our responsibility to make sure that you do not feel like we are the best of friends, because we are not, and we can't ever be. We won't ever be. I think of it kind of like a teacher-student relationship. We all had a really cool teacher that we would go to their classroom and we skinned our knee on the playground, running from the mean kids, and we would tell them all about it, and they would give us advice and make us feel like everything was okay, but they were not our friend. They were our teacher. There was still a power dynamic there. They told us some things about their life, but only what they thought was appropriate for us to know. It was always a mentor-mentee situation. Even long after you left the school, when you saw them again, it still kind of stayed the same dynamic. I've gone out to get coffee with former teachers, but it still feels a little bit like a teacher-student dynamic. We're just both adults now, so we can be a little bit more blurry with those lines. I've also had my former students or campers become of age and interact with me, and I always see them as my former students or campers. Even though both of us were children when we interacted with that relationship, and I can interact with them more openly now than I used to, that dynamic will still always be there. And I think a lot of that, specifically for those situations, also has to do with age, right? That plays a huge part of this as well. And I've thought about this recently in that, I have a solid handful of people in my life that are 10 plus years older than me who I consider to be friends within my minority groups. For me, knowing a 64-year-old lesbian couple and a 40-year-old disabled person helped me to feel less alone and know that people in my community get to grow old and be successful and live happy lives. Many people in minorities have a harder time finding peers and mentors with similar experiences to their own because we are a minority. There are less of us in the general population. But again, thinking further on those situations, they were also always structured as a sort of mentor-mentee situation. In the same way that you're sort of friends with your aunt and your grandpa, but it's also different because they're also your aunt and your grandpa. And again, it's the responsibility of the older person to set the boundaries in that dynamic and make sure that they are keeping you comfortable and safe and aren't potentially putting you at risk. I had somebody ask in my question box, how can we discuss these relationships while also being aware of neurodivergence and generally not being ableist about it? Because we know that a lot of autistic people really struggle with setting or understanding boundaries and picking up on social cues on either side, really, both for the fan obsessed with the creator and for the creator themselves. So how can we be more nuanced about that? And I'm gonna be totally honest with you, from a creator perspective, this is the Wild West. Nobody is telling us how to be famous. I'm not even famous, but you know what I mean. Nobody's telling us how to interact with fans or how any of this stuff works. Most of us don't have PR teams or guidance in any direction on how to function as human beings in these situations. The first year or so of having a channel, I used to answer every single DM that I got, and I would support that person and try to be a friend to everybody that reached out to me because I thought it was the right thing to do. But at some point I realized that some of these people would continuously come back to message me when they were struggling with things in their lives, and I realized I'm not a therapist. I don't know these people. I don't know their lives. They need to find people in their lives who know them really well, who can support them and give them advice. And I also do not have the capacity to support these people in the way that they need it from me. I cannot be that person for them, and I should not be. In general, some people use the DMs of people they know parasocially or our business emails as a journal entry, to just trauma dump to get it out somewhere to someone, which I am so glad that you trust me and that you are telling your story to someone. That's so important. But I am also a human being who cannot handle emotionally getting an email at 3 p.m. with somebody telling me in depth about the abuse they experienced at the hands of their ex-partner. I'm so glad that my story resonated with you, and you may think that you are the only one to ever send me a message like that, so you don't think it affects me that much, but before I blocked certain words from my DMs, comments, and emails, I would get 2 to 3 a week, and it was very, very, very re-traumatizing for me. But again, back to the concept of how can we talk about knowing boundaries without being ableist. I've been thinking a lot about this lately, particularly as the autistic community has been discussing patterns of autistic men causing real harm to autistic women and femme-presenting people, but then getting a pass for not knowing better. I'm the kind of person who always gives the benefit of the doubt. I've worked with enough people in my life to know that at least 90% of people who cause a lot of harm, who are abusive, etc., do not do it on purpose. They do not wake up one day and go, "Ah yes, today I'm going to harass this person and it shall be a good time." Nobody does that. They do what they think is the right thing to do, what serves their wants and their needs the best, and nobody calls them out for it. If they are called out for it, they ignore it, and or they aren't willing to do the research to learn and grow. Regardless of neurotype or minority or ability, this is just a thing that happens. That being said, if you cause harm, whether you mean it or not, you are responsible for doing something about that. If you know that you often miss social cues and struggle with boundaries and that this causes harm to people, it is your responsibility to figure out how to accommodate that so that you are not causing harm to people. For me, I will be totally honest and say that I watched a lot of commentary videos and drama channels, as well as like Reddit Am I the A-hole videos. That's where I learned how people respond to things, how people feel about things, how larger creators manage to completely mess up on a very massive scale, and then I take all of that information and all that knowledge and I see how that I can apply that to what I do so I can be a better and more well-rounded person and keep other people safe. For example, I am a Quaker. I therefore refer to everybody in my life as friend because to me I consider all people to be friends in a like religious we are all friends in this universe sense. But I saw a commentary YouTuber like a year ago talk about how they no longer say I love you at the end of their videos because people would message them saying I love you too, and they were like, that's weird, you don't actually know me, you only know me from my videos, you don't actually love me. And it made me realize that some people might hear me using the word friend in messages and assume I meant friend, not generalized Quaker friend, and that it might lead some people on to think that we had a genuine connection when really I just answered their question about dealing with a specific access need in a classroom once, which I'm happy to do, like whatever, reach out. But after watching that video, I stopped doing that. I stopped referring to people as friends that I didn't genuinely know in real life. And at this point, I also only respond to messages and comments when I have the capacity to, when I have something else to add to the conversation with a full understanding that I am a creator and they are a fan, or if they're asking for advice about something that I have genuine expertise on and I'm like happy to help. And I always leave the topic of conversation to the specific thing that they message me about and let them generally lead it, like I do with my students. I have also been rethinking the whole like hello my dears intro, and I guess also outro, it's in my outro as well, because while you are dear to me, you are dear to me in the collective. I have no idea who you individually actually are, and I don't want to lead anybody on anyway. So if you have any new ideas of how I could replace that, let me know in the comments. So like, yes, I struggle with boundaries and social cues. That is part of being autistic, but I've chosen a job that requires me to be able to figure those things out and to take on that responsibility for the safety of myself and my audience. It's usually not obvious to a fan when boundaries are crossed because they are focused more on like, I'm talking to this creator, whoa, and that puts them in inherent danger in these situations. So it is on me to figure that out to the best of my ability. And that's difficult and it takes a lot of time and energy to learn, but it's my responsibility to learn that and to know that. One thing I saw in the comments of something that I watched said the litmus test for a creator should be if you wouldn't ask a fan this question in front of your or their spouse, parents, partner, it in some way crosses a line, which I think is an important one to keep in mind, particularly for creators who really struggle with this. But truly, if you cannot sort out boundaries and the safety of your audience, you should not be directly interacting with your audience, period. That is a safety concern, and you should not be doing that. This also very much depends on what a creator does. There is extensive conversation about how Twitch streamers struggle with the most parasocial and quasi-parasocial relationships because Twitch is structured in such a way that you are directly interacting with the creator via chat. But again, they're not super focused on the usernames or on who said what. It's just a group of people who support them. They are responding to the messages, not to the people, which is hard to understand sometimes because it does feel personal when it is your message. For another creator, such as somebody whose entire channel is, I don't know, soap making and reviewing soap, it's easier for them to set boundaries and avoid other messages because if it's not about soap, they can just ignore it. For somebody like me, who is an educator, but I also share a lot of my life for the purpose of education, it can be a lot more difficult because it makes people feel like they can tell me their similar stories or ask me for advice, and that line becomes a lot more blurry because if it's involved with like accessible theater advice or getting through classrooms or that kind of stuff, like that is within my realm of knowledge and I will often respond and offer advice and help because that is just an extension of what I do in my channel. Or I'll just respond and be like, hey, I have a video about this, here you can watch it here. I do that more now than like direct specific responses, but it becomes blurry and sketchy and I have to be really, really careful. I also have an audience that is likely primarily autistic, or at least a large portion of it is autistic, meaning that my audience also has a harder time understanding boundaries and picking up on cues and understanding the difference between a parasocial and a real relationship, which objectively objectively means that I need to be extra good on my end at figuring out those boundaries and declaring them very clearly so as not to give somebody the wrong idea. All of that being said, it is possible for somebody to become friends with somebody else via being a creator. I have had some people who I have a lot in common with, such as alums of my alma mater or other creators, reach out to me and find me via my content, and I have made very healthy friendships that way, where we both went in with super healthy boundaries but then realized we had a lot in common and it became a regular friendship in real life. So now that I think about it, for me, every single one of those people are either friends with other creators or performers themselves, so they intrinsically understand the dynamics of this person on the screen is a performer doing a job and can kind of separate myself from my online self. And we generally don't talk about what I do for a living, we talk about other things. But those friendships are very few and far between, and very careful at the beginning to figure out what the heck's going on, and difficult to form. Another example of this is Broadway people. Often somebody will get cast in a show alongside an idol of theirs. That happens a lot, and the first day or two of rehearsal they're gonna be like, oh my gosh, it's this person, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. But then they realize their idol is also a human, and they're also human, and they're both working towards creating art together, and so they focus on the art that they need to make, and then the relationship between the two of them isn't weird, because they put their own fangirl self aside, and they figure out how to do the job that needs to be done. Sometimes it does stay weird if one or both people don't know boundaries, but particularly in the realm of the performance world, we get really used to meeting our idols, so we know how to not be weird about it. Will I do a happy dance around my room when I find out? Absolutely I will. Will I let them know that? Absolutely not. I will hide all of it, and I will be a completely normal human being who's meeting another completely normal human being when we interact. Because when I was little, I met and worked with several of my favorite composers, and the first few times, I forgot how to use words. I was so embarrassed and weird about it, and I definitely made them super uncomfortable, but I watched how people around me were calm and focused on the task at hand, and how they were able to, like, actually have a conversation with the composer, and then I just kind of figured it out and followed suit. So that leads us to the final section of this. How can you all as an audience protect yourself from harmful parasocial and quasi-parasocial relationships? And also, how can you protect your favorite musicians, creators, YouTubers, celebrities, athletes, otherwise public figures? The first is moderation. Don't try to become another person. If there are elements from somebody that speak to you, that help to give you guidance, whatever, please take those. Like, yes, but do not craft your entire existence around who somebody else is as a person and try to become them, because that is not healthy for you. Another part of moderation is making sure you have a healthy amount of normal social relationships too. That amount is different for everyone, but find things outside of parasocial connection that bring you joy and make you feel like you have community. A great way to do this is to engage in the communities around creators that you like. I know so many creators, larger creators, have Discords where their fans can befriend each other over a common interest. Join those, do that. I also think, I don't know anything about Discord, but I heard from somebody else that Discord you can literally just join any Discord and then you can make friends over common interests, like in general. So do that if you want to make friends. If making friends over the internet is more accessible to you, that's a really great place to get started, and then you can figure stuff out from there. Also, don't go around stalking or doxing people or defending egregious behavior just because you really like a person and feel like you know them, because you don't. You only know the parts of your life and personality that they want you to see. Dangerous behavior is still a problem regardless of who it comes from, and you really need to separate people from their actions and criticize the actions. Again, not just about celebrities and people online. This is also a really great life thing, because you could suddenly realize, wow, my friend's a terrible person, and stop being their friend, and it makes your life a lot better. Also, if you don't like somebody's content anymore, you don't want to watch them anymore, you don't have to. I know that I'm always like, oh, but I love this channel when they started and I don't really watch their videos anymore, but I don't want to unsubscribe because I feel bad for them and I want them to have success. Unsubscribe. Find content that brings you joy. You don't need to feel any loyalty to us people at all. You don't know us. We don't know you. So it's fine. Unsubscribe. I don't care. Go for it. I might be shooting myself in the foot by saying that, but yeah, if you don't like my content, don't be here. Simple as that. I will not be offended. I don't know who you are. It's also important to recognize when you're seeing a real person like they are a fictional character, because they are real people. Growing up, I saw a lot of composers' names and so much of the stuff that I studied so intensely and loved, and then I saw them in person and I fell apart because I was like, oh my gosh, how are they real? And then it made both of us really uncomfortable. And sometimes I meet people who like my work and they will look at me like I'm some magical unicorn being in the sky, and it makes me so uncomfortable because I am in no way a magical being. I'm a human who is doing a job. It just happens to be a job that is on a more public forum so everybody can see it, but it is deep down a job. Again, I know the whole like, oh my gosh, but it's this person though feeling. I get it. I often meet and work with creators and composers and people in the disability activism realm who I very much look up to and fangirled over before I met them or worked with them, but when I did, I just treated them like a human being who had knowledge about something I wanted to learn more about, and they did the same to me, and it was totally fine, and it was a healthy, normal experience, because neither of us went into it putting someone else on a pedestal or being anxious about how things were going to go. Truly, parasocial relationships aside, knowing how to do this is just a life skill set that helps in so many situations. A great example of that being job interviews. Like, go into conversations with people of, I am a human and they are a human and we are interacting and we have information we want to share with each other. And leave it as simple as that. It's really hard to explain this unicorn magical being feeling to somebody who does not do this kind of work, but like, you know that feeling when you're really little and you get dragged to your mom's work event and a bunch of people there know your name and what grade you're in and they ask you questions about things in your life that presumably your mom told them about you, but you genuinely have no idea and you feel a little bit weird about it because you have never seen these people before? It's like that. Or like when somebody walks up to you and introduces themselves to you and they're like, hi, I've heard so much about you, and you're like, what did you hear? What do you know? That. It feels like that. And like, it feels weird to complain about that because I am privileged in that, wow, I'm a creator and I shouldn't complain about fans, but it's weird. It's weird. Ludwig, a Twitch streamer, made a great video titled I Am Not Your Friend 2 years ago, and I want to include this clip for you here.
I get this all the time on Twitch, and sometimes even on YouTube or Twitter. Ludwig, you saved my life. No, I didn't save your life. What do you mean I saved your life? I've been playing Pokemon and Among Us in Minecraft. Where in that journey did I save your life? Did I pick up a scalpel and take out a cancerous lump? No. All I did was play games, and you used me as a distraction to maybe get through a bad period or whatever it was. But you did it. You used me. You could have used anything. You could have used Taylor Swift's most recent album. You could have just used Jay Schlatt himself if you wanted. It could have been anything that you used. You just happened to have used me, and I promise, if you didn't, you also would have been fine. All right? So stop giving me the credit that you deserve for doing all the work. I don't know you. How can I save you? Come on, think about it. Think about it. Anyway, look. I just think it's worth saying, and I've never talked about this really on YouTube, but parasocial relationships can be a bit dangerous, which is why it's worth at least being cognizant that they exist in the first place. And maybe just reevaluating your interests in things, you know, and your real life relationships and all those good things that make your life better. Instead of working on relationships with people that you're never really going to hang out with and that can't care about you. Not just don't, literally cannot. Whether it's me, whether it's Dream, or whether it's Ariana Grande. It scales, but it's all the exact same. Doesn't matter how many times Ariana Grande tweets I love you, she doesn't love you. She cannot love you. She will never love you. She only loves the entire group of people who let her do what she loves to do, which isn't the same as loving you. Get it?
When I meet a fan for the first time, it often feels like that mom's job example. For me, that's the start of the interaction. I am meeting you for the first time. But for the fan, they feel like they've known me for years, and so they often feel like they can start to tell me really personal stuff about their life, and it's really disorienting for me because I have no idea who the heck that they are. And this also isn't just an in-person thing either. This includes our DMs or our emails as a place to explain your life story or ask us out on dates. Please do not ask me out on a date. It is weird, and also it's usually men who do it, which is really funny to me because it's usually over Instagram, and my Instagram handle literally has the word lesbian in it. Gabby Bell and Abilena Sabrina have a series called Deranged DMs where they read out the kinds of inappropriate messages that they receive on the regular as creators. I think it gives a really great rundown of the kind of harassment creators, particularly femme creators, face on a daily basis but in an entertaining way, so I do recommend checking that out. If you want to send a creator a message saying that you appreciate their work, you are more than welcome to. I'm going to be fully honest and say I do save all those messages. They do make me feel like what I'm doing is worth it and that I'm making a difference, and when I'm having a rough day, I do look back at them. But when people say, hey, here's a massive trauma dump of what I've been through, thanks for what you do, or hey, I've watched your work for a really long time and therefore you owe me something because I've been a loyal fan, that makes me really uncomfortable, and that's really, really weird, and please don't do that. Also, don't stalk me. That has also happened. Please don't do that. Ew, don't stalk me. Thank you. Again, your favorite creators are people just like you, and while it's primarily our responsibility to help set up boundaried communication if we do interact with you, it is important for the audience to create their own boundaries as well, because we are not your friends and we never will be. but we're also not magical beings, unicorns in the sky either. I'll be the first to say that when I meet new people, I usually do not talk about what I do for a living because it does, just even saying I'm a YouTuber makes people look at me differently. And again, it feels weird to be complaining about that because this is such a privileged job that I hold and I'm so grateful for it, but I'm gonna be honest about it, right? Like, that is a thing that happens. So please look at creators as people because we are people. Look at movie stars as people because they are people. That's it. Very simple. Again, parasocial relationships are not bad. As humans, we literally cannot avoid them, whether they're from YouTube or TV or movies or books or the stories that people tell us about other people that we've never met. And it is normal to feel affinity toward these people and feel feelings when they turn out to not be who we thought they were, and also like when something happens to them. And all of this can really help us with our confidence and with learning to be a better person and a better friend. But what's important is that you put effort and energy into real life relationships too, because those are also really important. I hope that this was helpful. I'm going to put this video in my playlist on neurotypical social skills, which I will also link in the description for you if you need it. I have a video there specifically on boundaries that might also be a good tool as a jumping off point from this video. But in the meantime, please let me know what you think about all of this in the comments, and also if there's anything I can like work on or get better at, because this creating on the internet is kind of still the Wild West. There are not guidelines for us, so I'm always open to learning to do better and take better care of my audience. So yeah. Also, if you have any potential replacements for my dears, you can put them in there as well. Or maybe I'm just overthinking that. I don't know. Let me know what you think. Either way, thank you for listening. Thank you for learning. Remember, it is never too late to start over, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.